So we're going to just go through this in a little chronological order before we go into the big room. I don't do workshops, or I don't do, how do I make my pots or anything like that. I just don't believe in that. It's like you're asking the magician to say, here's my tricks and here's that. But the ceramic community depends on that sharing of information, and there's a value to it. I just never saw it, and I never wanted to do it. But I got cajoled into going to a workshop. So in that workshop, I said, let me try the notion of steel and ceramic. So I really disappointed them because they were expecting something else. So this is the first piece I made with wire and clay. And the idea was I did circles, I did oblongs, I did triangles. I wired them together rather than welding, but was to make an abstract cup. I don't have to make a cup that looks real. I like Picasso, the fracture, the breakup. And when I did that, I began to realize, oh, look, the steel, it doesn't warp or bend. I'm firing to 04. It cracks a little bit, but it's not important. It adds to the aesthetic. Now, if any of you went on my websites and saw the photorealist, all of that is decayed, broken, sagging, twisted, tortured, because that's what wood does. In clay, I could do it fast. If you look at a barn on the road on 81, it's 100 years for it to sag or rot or collapse. So my aesthetic has always had an element of decay in it. And I attribute that to, my parents. We also grew up in a community. There was a lot of Jewish survivors of the camps or immigrants that had gotten out before the camps. But it was part of the milieu, the loss. The loss of innocence, the loss of, your family, the loss of your home, your health, and your future. It was my mother's future was, stopped dead by, World War II. And, when you see the Ukrainian thing, it's just hard to imagine it's come back again. But I wanted in the show, when we were talking with Garth and I, is to show work just doesn't appear. This is, I think, I forget, is there a date on it? 1990. Okay. So I didn't pursue too much of this because I don't know what I was doing. I was doing different things, but I knew I could do it. So now if we come over here, I was talking, here, Garth. This is another important piece. Alan himself was a photographer and an artist, and he liked making things, so he wanted to work in ceramics. The problem of any of you that have worked in ceramics, it's a long process. You make something, it's got to dry, it's got to harden, then you come back and you add. So the idea I had at that time was, let me extrude shapes with an extruder, and let me bisque them. Okay, so now they're sticks, like, whatever. And now we're going to use hot glue, and we're going to have an idea. And the idea in this one was a three-sided head. And so we call it a tertiophrenic head. But all this, which is bronze today, started off as extruded ceramics, hot glued. So we were able to make this piece in a 3-hour session. Alan has an attention deficit problem, so that was about the length of time I could hold him tight. But we produced 4 pieces. But now we have a hot glue bisque ceramic piece. So Alan said, well, what can we do? I said, well, let's try bronze casting. And that's what we did. We went to the Modern Art Foundry over, it's in Greenpoint, next to the Steinway, and we made rubber molds, and then we made it in bronze. But the origin of this, and there's still a number of pieces, was ceramic. But it was showing that you could draw in clay, okay, and you could have open space, and you could resist gravity. So this was a very important piece in my development. I have to look at the year again. Yeah, 1986, so this predates my cup a little bit. Now, but from there, we're going to digress. You have it on dolly? This is a little farther away. My wife is a painter, and basically she was collecting sticks, and in her classes at St. Anne's in Brooklyn Heights, she would have the kids build little stick figures or collages, and then she started building larger figures. So I was invited to work at Watershed, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I told Mission, I said, look, why don't you come with me, and why don't we devise a series of figures that will use steel as the stick and then clay as the flesh. So this is what we call the Demon and Siren series. This is metal rebar, this is terracotta. They're painted with temperas and whatnot because, again, this is sculpture. We're not worrying about the purity of material. All the men, he's holding a gun and a Bible in his hand, and he's the Minister of Defense. This is the Minister of Public Relations, how corporations, give you a face or a facade to pretend they're actually doing the right things for you. But what that did, again, was let me know that I could basically work with welded steel and not worry about the process. And if the clay cracked or shrank, no big deal. So we're going to go to, we'll go over here to this piece, then we'll jump back. I'm sorry, Garth. You're talking about the abstraction of a cup. This is the abstraction of a teapot. Okay, so once I began to realize I could work like this, I decided to work going back to the vessel into making abstractions of vessels. I focused strictly on the teapot, the bottle, and the pitcher. And in this, someone was talking about the Brooklyn Bridge wire. In Michelin's neighborhood, which is right by the bridge, they were discarding bundles of Brooklyn Bridge wire. And that wire was very flexible. You could bend. I could make all these crazy drawings. I could do the lines. And then I started welding the wire to get strength together. And so the teapot's here, the spout is here, the handle's here, but I wanted to obscure it with sails. Now what I do is I told Garth, we were talking earlier, I keep pieces if they're important. So like this piece is not for sale. This is too important in my evolution, and it's just as a memory that, I did have one creative breakthrough. Maybe I'll get lucky and have another one, so that will inspire me towards that. This piece is also a piece. I made a number of, these pieces, but this one particularly was important to break from the realism of the object, which I did or didn't do successfully, depending. This piece, now we're going to go back and force Garth to dolly the camera. This leads us to the last pieces in what I call the wireframe series. And this is 1996. So the scale has changed. This is the height of my kiln. It's not necessarily the depth or width. And you can see the picture. The spout is here. The handle is here. There are fragments of a real pitcher stuck in here as shards. Okay, because I was slip casting pitchers, and I did a couple bodies of work with broken pots. And in this one, this side has got all the angles and planes of that teapot, but it's got the density and craziness that you'll see in the CIC pieces. Okay? And again, Brooklyn Bridge wire is significant in this. So we're going to jump to the computer. Okay? You can sit there. On the wall, I'm just going to point out several of the pieces. Okay, if you look at this piece over here, this is a print from the samples. Okay, there's 4 of them. I don't know if Garth exhibited them all, but that was a piece where I put together, 3 or 4 painters, and I end up with a composition that I can't believe. This is gorgeous. This is beautiful. I love the colors and whatnot. But when you look, there's another piece up there above the burner, the turquoise and red. There's a 3D piece up there. But the problem with computer output is that it's sterile. A lot of people are trying 3D printing, but in my mind, that's just like too concentric and too over-designed and too tight. And until they can mess it up like a George Orr, I'm not that interested. But doing that work said, okay, let me take that painting and let me transform it into this piece. So this piece is related to that. Obviously, it's not, one-to-one. It's not a photorealist interpretation of the drawing. It's getting the essence, the shape, some of the colors, and whatever. These pieces I did at LSU when I was teaching down there for a semester. And on my job description, I worked at Juilliard. This reflects the layers. That, the problem that I found, you can turn it around, but it's not as interesting on the back side. So it's really frontal. It's like a theater set. I could almost imagine a person being here, and this is an opera, and he's singing. And the same with this piece here. So when I reached that limitation, I mean, I like them, they're perfect, they're commercial, they can fit into your living room. We will take orders on these pieces at the end of the day. We have layaway programs, easy financing. So that was good in the sense of sculpture. Big pieces like that, you have a problem. You know, people don't have room for sculpture. Every dealer I've been with, including Leslie, says, can you make some wall pieces? Yeah, I can make wall pieces, but it doesn't interest me. So I'm stuck. You're stuck with pieces where you have to have all your friends take tetanus shots before they walk into your house, because God knows what will happen. So, right, he's scarred here. So in doing the LSU pieces, go ahead, jump in.
At what temperature does this all
This is 04, 06. So steel does not fall apart, but it moves. So when I fire a piece like this, I have blocks under everything. You know, even a piece like this, I'll put blocks here. And I've had kiln accidents where it does melt down, you know, totally. So
is that about 2,000 degrees?
2,000, yeah, plus or minus. And you can fire it 2 or 3 times. If you go to the 4th time, the steel has lost most of its strength, and it won't maintain its shape. So, and again, I had transitioned from stoneware, cone 9 in my pottery days, and I did my first ceramic landscapes in stoneware, to then cone 6, and then when I was doing this, you know, I don't need cone 6. You know, I don't need those colors. So, and I could use low fire glazes. So after working at LSU and doing these, I met a student that could teach me 3D Studio Max. Just a minute, bear with me. 3D Studio Max is a 3D program to design objects and build objects. So I took a class from him, and we did the same thing. We used the sample images. Now I put them in a 3D program. I extrude them. I make them three-dimensionals, and then I put them together. So 2 of the sculptures that came out of this is this one. The image is that of a goat, so it was very weird to start with abstraction and end up with like a surreal animal. And I was surprised. And then this piece here is another piece in what I call the word series. Again, it's totally abstract, like the computer. See, if you look at the top row, the 3rd image over, that's a 3D print of using the same technique. And again, I was totally excited by what was coming out of the computer. Now you don't have, this one's 3D. I built that one in 3D. This piece right here. And that was I mean, again, you know, part of the thing about being a child is you make up worlds and you make up stories. And when you forget how to do that, what's this? Oh, thank you. There, you're going to save my life here. I'll be able to finish. So when I printed that one out and when I made it, in my mind there was a walking figure, that yellow vertical. There's also a turquoise vessel, and it's like that's me on my journey through the vessel into abstraction. So again, that's my mind, that's my interpretation, but that's what a child does, you know. You take 2 little things, you make a story, you play, and like that, you know. And that's, you know, as an adult, it's nice to be able to indulge your child. You don't necessarily make money from it, but at least you feel good for a short period of time. So in that sense, what you're seeing here, this is all up to about the year 2000, okay? And then my mother, you know, got sick. She had a stroke. I had to go to Chicago. I had to help her move. And then I moved my studio. So for a number of years, I didn't make any sculpture, you know, which was fine. I mean, you know, I'm not that compulsive or neurotic. I didn't have a demand or an audience for the work, so I'm not losing anything. You know, I'm in fact saving storage space, which is a good thing. But what I did was, by moving upstate, that got me into a different category of ideas and thoughts. The interim here, we'll look at these pictures here. When I lost my gallery, it was like you know, in the early 80s. This is when all the steel mills were being destroyed. So I spent 2-3 years on a project called Home Scrap. The PDF is available on my website. It's free. All my books are for free. So you can download any PDF on my website and print it out yourself, or study the images. But I documented all the abandoned mills. This was where my father worked in U.S. Steel, the South Side, which is now all torn down and is vacant. So I caught a lot of the sites before it's just rubble, and I'm happy about that. In doing the steel mill projects, I did major paintings, and I got a grant from the NEA in one of the last individual artist awards for painting, but they were really 3D reliefs. I picked up the scrap metal from the sites, I picked up the dirt, I picked up the dried plants. I took a photograph like this, and I rendered it 3D. What I realized, though, in the story of the mills is it's people. My sculptures talk? You added sound? Or someone's phone. There it is.
It goes to Vangelis.
Okay. So one of the issues in the black and whites, they don't give you, again, the texture of the place, the ambience of the place, the mood of the place, or the history of the place. They're just flat, neutral, much like the computer print. So that's why I built the tactile 3D paintings. But then I stumbled on this, it was a survey of the workers from the south side of Chicago, the Hull House. And they were, interviewing them about what happened to you in your life when you lost your job. And, in a brilliant piece of creativity, they took the original handwritten messages from the survey and printed it in the brochure. Oddly enough, the woman that did this, her mother was a ceramic store dealer that I had sold my pots to out in Cape Cod. So it was very weird synchronicity. But what it did was it gave me a personalism. I picked up pictures of steel workers and overlaid the words on an image of an abstract steel worker. So now my paintings had a picture that was personalized. It's not just the ruins, here's what happened to the person. And each one of them, the question was real simple. What have been the worst effects of you being unemployed on you and your family? Loss of home, loss of wife and family, loss of friends, loss of self-respect and esteem, depression and anger, feelings of hopelessness. And, when you look at the troubles America is facing today, this is at the core of it. Both sides, whether Democrat or Republicans, based their bet on globalization. That destroyed the American working class. Okay, and a job at Walmart or Dunkin' Donuts does not compensate. When I worked at U.S. Steel, I was making $15 an hour in 1968. That would be like $60, $70 today, right? And all my friends, they could have a boat, they could have a cabin in Michigan to go hunting, they could support their kids, they could have 3 cars. They had the American dream, even though they were destroying their body and their jobs, but that was the trade-off. So you look at this stuff, and this is from the 80s, this has been festering in America a long time. And what the answer is, I don't have the answer, but that anger can be utilized and manipulated and directed. And most of the times against the wrong people, and it's never going to be against the corporations that made those decisions or the politicians that facilitated it. But in any case, that was an important breakthrough, that personalism. When I moved upstate, well, we'll digress since we're talking about labor. Studying American history, what you realize is that history is buried. You'll have a nice image of Franklin D. Roosevelt, but you won't necessarily have that many pictures of the soldiers that fought in World War II. The same with the laborers. So again, when I was doing the steel mill project, I'm going to bookstores in all these little towns. And at the bottom of a shelf in a dusty bin, I'd pick up a book and it'd say 50 years of U.S. Steel, 1954. And there's an LP record in it, sounds of steel making, and there's all these images of workers. Now, you cannot go into a steel mill, you can't go into a chip manufacturing company and take pictures. They're never going to let you do it. They'll have a corporate photographer make sure there's no OSHA issues, it's clean, it's been washed and waxed. They take the picture, oh, look how nice it is to work there, right? Or the same in the Apple factories in China. Oh, well, this looks nice. So I started realizing there's a whole hidden history of labor in corporate histories. vanity publications. So, the book from U.S. Steel was like $2. How could I not buy it, even just for the record? I should make you a copy of the record. So I just started, everywhere I went, I'd buy these books. 100 years of asbestos manufacturing, 1900. The print, no one is wearing a mask. They're standing there. This is 1900. They're working 14-hour days, 7 days a week. And they're happy because they're immigrants working that job. So over the years, I put together about 1,200 of these books. I did find a couple dealers that would sell me books. They'd say, I got a corporate history. And the criterion was always, does it have pictures of workers? Okay. Half the books just had the CEOs, the founder, little headshots. Here's Joey Rasmussen. He, came up with the Cutlery Company. I have Camillus, actually. That was interesting. There was a corporate history of Camillus, but they had pictures of labor. So I put together, this library, and here the saddest part was this. In middle 80s, I decided it had to be preserved. A lot of the paper is old. It had to be in the right conditions. It's not archival, the paper. So I tried to, sell the collection to American universities and libraries. I did not get a taker. All I got was from even the Getty Foundation, the Getty, what is it called? The Corbis, that has all the stock photographs. I just could not get a bite. Or they would say, well, we have $400 for acquisition. And I didn't want much. I said, okay, $20 a volume, or, I was willing to negotiate. So I called the dealer, and he says, I know just who you want to talk to. They put me in touch with a Japanese university. They sent me a check for $40,000. They came the next week to air freight the books out there. So I was very happy because I made some money, but I was very depressed because this is a history of America, and it's gone. And we don't value our own history, So there was a sadness. I was happy it's preserved, but, America is lost out. But in America, we don't care about history. It's what's the next new and latest thing. So anyone that builds a historical museum, even if it's the history of the computer, or the rolling pin, you go to antique stores, rug beaters. We were over in that, the Syracuse Antique Mart, that 5-story thing. There was like a half a dozen rug beaters there, and we're all looking at the shapes. My God. But see, in my collections, I don't pay for anything, so I couldn't, in conscience, $20, that's a lot of money. So in any case, I have a website called Lost Labor. Again, the book is available on the website for free. You can just download it and look at the PDFs. And that was, just a sense of all the pictures of labor. And what you'll note is when World War II came around, workers were kings and queens. So they shot them in noble, enhancing images. These are our friends. They're saving democracy. They're fighting fascism. No problem. When World War II was over, they're our enemy. Destroy the unions, wipe them out, and put them back to, wage slaves. In moving, here, this is, since we already went by this is one of the prints from the Flat series, putting together. Is the title of the print here?
Yes.
I don't see it necessarily. But in any case, this is one of the flat ones. This is one of the 3D ones. Oh, it's on that side. Read the title.
Avex Combine DEK1N plus.
Okay, so that's two of de Kooning's paintings, one of Gorky, one of Guston, and one of Hoffman. So those 5 separations are in this one piece here. Okay, and I made a beautiful sculpture that I'm keeping for myself from this composition like those, the LSU. When I moved to the Borscht Belt, it's very funny. Most of my friends are Jewish, and I somehow did not know about the Borscht Belt or didn't register. So I end up in the Borscht Belt, and I'm saying, all this makes sense. Jack Benny, Milton Berle. America has been driven by Jewish humor, and we don't know it because they also hid who and what they were. But the Borscht Belt, I was at a time, 2005, 2006, most of these structures are gone. They're being torn down because they're not functional anymore. You pay taxes on a building even if it's not functioning, so by tearing it down, your land, you reduce the taxes. This is what they call a kukkelane, which is a Yiddish term. You can see the fire escape. It really was an old farmhouse, but what they did was they would separate this into like maybe 10 rooms. Each room would have a little face basin and water. There'd be a communal toilet and a communal kitchen. And you had major hotels there, Grossinger's, Concord, Kutcher's, the Nevele, and they required a large staff. So in the summer, I know from the Bowery bums, they would, go through the Bowery and pick up people that knew how to cook or wash, bring them upstate, shove them in one of these places. They couldn't drink, they would just work, and then 2 months later they'd go back to the Bowery, and they'd have, a few $100s in their pockets. But, I did, again, as much as I could photograph within a 10-mile radius. I probably have, maybe 3,000 structures. Right now, the Hasidim are growing as a population in that area, and they're buying up as many vacant sites as they can that are large, 50 to 100 acres, because they're building big barracks, winterized all year round houses. And each of these places have like 8 to 10 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, because their families are large. And the problem we're having in Sullivan County is a water usage and a sewer issue. We're not designed for the summertime population of 150,000. In the winter, it's 15,000. So everything works well. So there's clashes of it. What do we do? How do you reconcile people want to live here, they have the money to do so. Well, how are we going to pay for the sewer facility plant that has to be built now? And then will that be enough for the continual growth? So, but anyway, that was one issue. The second issue, all the people that owned the bungalows and hotels lived in the city. So I could never find out who was the owner. I mean, sometimes it would, a local person, Meyer Shapansky owns this one. Okay, so if I found a name, I'd put it down. But I bumped into Bobby and Phil Kaplan in the 60s and 70s. There were over 200 egg farms in Sullivan County. They supplied New York City with fresh eggs. And they were doing that since the 40s. Bobby and Phil, it was one of 2 egg farms that was left. They had 250,000 birds, and Bry Farm had 500,000 birds. Now that sounds like a lot, but today an average egg farm has 4 million birds. The economy of scale, whether it's breeders or egg layers or whatever. And the other thing I realized, or I found out much to my dismay, is I met what was his name? I can't remember, but he raised the baby chicks and sold them for $1 a piece to the egg farms. And we're talking, and he says, you realize all the male chicks are killed. So I'm saying, so you hatch 500,000 birds a year and you kill 250,000? Yeah, that's about right. And I'm saying, God, I was glad I was not reincarnated as a male chicken. The odds are slim. But in the egg farms, I could find the local owners because they lived there. So this is Paul Firk's egg coop. Now, it didn't last long. By the 60s, he was too small. But you can see he had 3 levels in the coop. Down here, 1, 2, 3, that was just the attic. And in those days, they were doing it by hand. You had a cage, the egg dropped, you collected it with baskets, you took it out, you candled the egg to make sure it was, not cracked, you packaged it, and you sold it to a broker. So I photographed probably 120 places. And even if it was a rubble site, someone could say that's Joel Shapiro's site. So I have a name, I have a location, I don't have the coop, but it was important preserving the history. And then I interviewed whoever I could that was connected to the egg farms. A couple were farmers, some were children of farmers. And I think the best is what Bobby and Phil said. I asked him, do you ever take vacations? And he looks at me and says, we're married to the birds. Meaning 365 days a year. Yeah, and that was it. Okay, and so now the last thing to touch on is collections. Okay, like I said, I pride myself in that my collections have not cost me a dime. And in other words, I can't go somewhere and buy a gas burner. I can't go somewhere and buy a rusty piece of enamelware, a rusty bucket, or an agitator. So the enamelware comes out of the Borscht Belt. Behind every bungalow colony, behind every cuckoo-lane, there was a burn pit. People burned their garbage. So they'd throw everything in the garbage, baby strollers, galvanized wash basins, and it didn't matter. So when you walked behind, you'd find bottles, and a lot of people collected bottles, and they would look for those things. I just said, oh, these are pretty. But as you look at the colors, on them, the faded patina, these are great ceramic colors. I wish I had the patience to develop them. So, I probably have about 400 or 500 pieces. Not all of them are so pretty, okay? I'll guarantee you that. But once you're a collector, okay, it's enamelware. Oh, it's white again. White with a red trim. And I keep hoping I'm going to meet someone among this group that says, I have a rusty piece. I'll trade you. 2 for 1, 3 for 1. So, but that was an important part of, see these compositions here. When I was not making sculpture, I was working on photography. So I had a big tabletop setup. I'm gluing the enamelware in compositions with mirrors, and I'm photographing it. And this is setting the aesthetic and the creative principle behind the latest sculptures. I didn't know it at the time. I was just saying, oh, this is a nice photograph. This is fun. I have to keep busy. Okay? The rusty buckets is the same level. I like it in the sense that I started as a functional potter, and it was just interesting to see how many rusty buckets were along the side of the road. Everywhere I turned, there was a rusty bucket. One hillside, what's great about the country, they work hard at getting rid of their garbage. You climb up a hill, and there's a 1949 Dodge. How the fuck did they get that up here? Or a refrigerator. On one hillside going to a river, I climbed down, I see a bucket. By the time I was done, there was like 35 rusty buckets I picked up. And I'm happy because, oh wow, I made a score today. And the buckets, each one is unique. This one is one of my favorite because obviously a guy with a shotgun was using it for target practice. So, you see, it's great. Some of them have, cement in them. Some of them have tar or whatever. And you'll see that I use those. Well, there's a single rusty. Do you have a triptych anywhere? Okay, see on the top, I just devised relationships of how to, put the buckets together and have fun photographing. Photography is great because it's intellectual. You construct something, you frame it, and you take a picture, and then you manipulate it. Or you're outdoors, there's the house. It's a very fun process, of framing and, controlling and making something beautiful. This collection dates back a long time. In one of my former jobs, I was a junk man. And a junk man meant that you would drive around the city. There's a rusty refrigerator, there's a stove, there's some aluminum, there's some copper. You'd pick it up, take it to the yard, and get, whatever it was, the going price. 10 cents a pound for cast iron, so we didn't pick up radiators too often. But aluminum was worthwhile, copper. And in cleaning out places, because I also had a job doing that, I'm picking up what they call a laundry stove. In the old apartment buildings in Chicago, you went downstairs, you heated water to do your laundry. So they had little, big hot plates, 3-burner, so you could heat your hot water and do your laundry in big basins. So I pick up the stove and I see this burner and I says, my God, look at that. I still look at it and I think it's like an African sculpture. It doesn't look American, it doesn't look industrial. And I'm saying, my God, this is beautiful. So this is 68, I keep it. I moved to New York, I take it with me. I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to find a sculpture that I can use it in, make a collage or add to it. But every time I looked at it, I said, I can't touch this. It's really gorgeous. And I moved into the Bowery, which was the restaurant supply district of used equipment. So everywhere I went, there was a stove, a gas fryer, a space heater. This is from a gas space heater. It sits overhead in the garage. There's 4 of them, and the gas comes out here. This is a more contemporary one made out of steel, flat steel, pressed and shaped. Okay? But everywhere, this is the cheaper version on a hot water heater. Again, the quality diminished as we went on. This one's aluminum, the stove, a contemporary stove. But I have probably about 250 of these now. So again, don't become addicted to a collection. That's really bad. And especially now where stamps no longer have value. coins are losing their value other than the weight in silver. So that's what, the melt value now they're talking about. This one is useless because no one collects stove burners. But the sense of humor, this is I'm going to take this up here. This is a hot plate, So you look at the gas burner, it went to, propane or natural gas, and this is how you heated your cup of coffee. And I found this in an old roll top stove. This is the broiler in a gas oven, because you need a big flame to heat that. So these two are broilers here. But one of the things about the cast iron is there's a term called pattern maker. And a pattern maker was a person that carved in wood the object that was going to be cast. One time I'm in Ohio, Lorain, Ohio. I'm at the U.S. Steel Works that's abandoned, and I'm in a yard. And I'm looking at wooden models of gears that are 6 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet. I mean, dozens of wooden carved patterns for the machinery of the steel mill, which they're burning. Right? That's it. Now, you will go into antique stores and you will find patterns are being sold. There's some smaller scale. But someone carved this by hand. And then that was used as the basis for making a cast imprint into the sand. Then they pour the steel in. I found this outside my door. And I could not believe it. I mean, a Jewish star. Now, it's not quite a Jewish star because it tapers. It looks like an American star. But I just started laughing that someone, I will use the Yiddish word, had the chutzpah to say, okay, you don't like Jews? I'm going to put a Jewish symbol in your stove and you're not going to know it. And again, I fell in love with it. Never saw another one, never saw anything about it. Now, I told Garth, and this is an interesting thing when you're a collector, when you collect stamps, I collected commemorative stamps when I was a kid. Everyone had baseball cards or stamps or comic books or whatever. But it was easy to archive. Here's edition 22 of Marvel Superman. Here's the 1933 commemorative stamp. I never took down the names of the appliances I took them from. And I regret that because I remember some of the names like Red Rose Stove or, blah, blah, blah. It just goes on. So I really wasn't a real collector. I was just, a superficial, look at the picture. And she's cute, fine, I'll take her home. That's it. That's what I did. And that hurts me today because I would have liked to at least documented what I could have. I made up for it later on. But, Garth, it's interesting seeing this work with this work, right? And I appreciate that he wanted to show it. Agitators, it's another industrial object, but, they started with aluminum. Some of them look like a boat anchor. Then they went to the circular, the white, and I probably have 40 or 50 of them. They're harder to take out of the washing machine. There's a nut. No, there's a lot of technical things being applied. There's a bolt holding it down, and a lot of times you could not release the bolt.
Okay, you have an enormous amount of collection, hundreds of these things. How do you keep them? Where do you keep them?
I have an abandoned gas station that was then converted to a studio. I have a yard that's fenced in. So I have steel shelves that I've put them under tarp. And no one steals them. Although I do get worried because I have a lot of scrap steel. There are a couple of junkers in my neighborhood that one day they might find my stash of, wire, rusty rebar, all the stuff I use in my sculpture and say, oh wow, a gold mine. But so far, I've been there 15 years, and there's been no theft issues. But, they're not under lock and key. They're not displayed in glass vitrines. If I had a big enough house, I'd love to. But, this gives you a sense of the collection. But, again, there is a book called Stove Burner. It's available for free. There's a book called 99 Rusty Buckets. Again, you're getting a deal, available for free. Okay? You can download any PDF. I don't have a collection book for the enamelware because that one was, it was used in other projects and I just never did that, Okay, so we're finished here and now we're going to wrap it up. Oh, let's talk here though. We'll just come over here. Garth, I was surprised when I walked in because Garth did something I wouldn't have done, which I really appreciate. This is the CIC pieces. Okay, by the time I got to the last edition of CIC, you'll see the other series, the R&D and the what do you call it? Triharmonic. When we have this, do I want to put a footprint? No. So here, this is the trick. Any of you divulge this, I'll track you down. Okay. What we did was I welded a basket. Okay. And I had a prong put on it because I knew I was going to insert it. This is a 3rd edition. So I knew what I was doing. Lauren blew the glass into the basket. Okay. And I didn't know enough about glass. I mean, it's very difficult working creatively with another person because you don't necessarily communicate clearly, or you don't have the same language or the same terms. Now I know more about glass. I was watching Blown Away on Netflix, and I'm saying, oh my God, I could do that. Jesus. But he blew that in. Now, when I came up with the idea, I didn't think what would happen when you blew glass into a shape. I'm saying, well, I got a line here. The line will stop the glass. It'll be a flat plane. I'll have like a box or something angular. What I was lucky in the accident was it acted like a bubble. So the wire there, you get that great bulge. I had no clue, no idea. But what you want to go?
I'm just curious, what keeps the glass? Is it the air moving through it?
He's blowing it. When you're having
Collapse on itself?
it's a bubble.
It's steel?
Yeah, it's a bubble there, and he's got a pipe. So like a balloon. You're blowing up the balloon. Except it's molten glass, and when you stop, it'll freeze or, cool in this shape. But that added a quality to my work that I didn't have. I mean, you look at my work, okay, yes, it's bent, it's deformed, it's twisted, but it's not fluid. It's not a frozen moment in time. It's not organic. It's not beautiful. So this is the element that transforms my work, and it was a total accident, And even Lauren didn't think about this, And I tease Lauren. Lauren is a very good glass blower. He's got a great company doing architectural glass. But I look at it, if you took away this metal frame, you would have a vase that would be a knockout. And I keep, Lauren, look at, you'd have a great career. You'd have fun. Every piece is different. And you could make the frame where it's hinged. I mean, there's all these things you could do. But I didn't convince him. I mean, this is the thing about all of us as artists. We are stubborn MFs, and we will not drink the water, even if it's placed under your nose, even if it's, alcohol. No, we want to do what we want to do, and it takes us 10 years to realize we went down the wrong fucking path. And then it's too late. So in any case, I'm putting this back in. All the glass is affixed in that form or fashion. But the fluidity of glass is amazing. Okay, let me see. Why is this not going back? Okay, there we go. Okay, it's safe. Now the other thing that the kiln, when you work in ceramics, because technically I am working in ceramics, the kiln is the parameter by which you can make your work. If your kiln is 36 inches high, you can't build something higher than 36. If you look at Viola Fry, she built it in sections. And then she glued the sections to make a 10-foot piece. But you see the seam. And I hated the seam. It just breaks the flow. But that was what you had to do. Stephen DeStabler, there's a number of artists that had to work in sections. I never worked in sections. I just worked by the parameter of the kiln. But I began to realize that, wait a second, I build the piece in the kiln. What's to prevent me from welding on an additional section? I'm working in steel. So this whole piece is welded after it comes out of the kiln. This whole piece here is welded on afterwards. So I built two pieces that made me, open my eyes that I don't have to be defined by the kiln. I can do whatever I want, because I'm using steel. So the trick is just finding out, where to weld it. But since everything's black, it's not hard. Even if the welding thing, burns the clay or changes the color of clay, doesn't matter. No one can see it. And if I didn't tell you, you would never figure it out. But this was an important breakthrough. And then, as I told Garth, it's like, all these years I didn't think about it. Why at the last moment do I think, oh, I can do this? It slipped my mind, walked right by me, And then, whatever reason, I came back and said, oh, I can do that. And that changed the nature of the work. Now the problem is the work is getting too big. So Garth will testify it takes 4 people to lift the work, whereas before it was 2 people. And then finding 4 people in my town, it's very hard. But the other thing coming from those photographs was the addition of mirrors and glass to fracture the viewing experience. You know, again, we would like to think that we're all together, we know what we're doing, we know who we are, but we don't. We are reflections of others, we're reflections of ourselves, we're unclear, clear, you know, distinct, not distinct, and the mirror adds another element. And that was the basis of the triharmonic, adding mirrors. There are automotive parts. There's like a piston here, there's a header. I think this is from a 350 Chevy as the middle structure. So I do stick in mechanical parts in the beginning. So this was, you know, the last, again, like I said, it was a pleasure that I didn't have the show in 2020. You would not be seeing this piece or 2 other pieces. And they are the most important pieces. And it's a jumping off point. Because now I could work on the wall if I want. I could just make sections and, you know, weld them together, have them long and vertical or long and horizontal, and I can make them flat.
I want to rewind slightly on someone who's given like a dozen tours already of this show. The inclusion of the auto parts, the piston there, the parts of barbecue grills and refrigerator racks that you can find in here are like a great adult scavenger hunt. We all do this so much for kids, but when you have, like, say, a disinterested dad or something in here, that little scavenger hunt is gold with Raymon's work. The fact that there are so many recognizable dude objects that are built, that are sprinkled throughout,
Including spark plugs. tucked in the corner there.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Okay, so we'll digress as we walk here. When you work, like I said, working with other people creatively is always a problem. So in the last batch of my enamelware photographs, I did what I call the blurs. I didn't see well when I was a kid, and I didn't know it. And so in 5th grade, I'd been transferred to a Catholic grade school. It was identify the capitals by the shape of the states. I had it down cold. But I'm at the back of the class, but she didn't want you to read on the board what the capital was. I couldn't see. I'm looking like this. Can I go closer? Pretty soon I'm like up here. But, oh, Pierre, North Dakota, no problem. And then the nun calls my mother, says, you know, your son needs glasses. So, was that? Well, yeah, but my mother didn't recognize it. She didn't take me to a doctor. The nun recognized it. So when I was doing this work, I wanted to recreate my visual experience. And I'm losing my eyesight now as we speak. I have an astigmatism. I have, all these little things. I won't be able to see in a few years. So I wanted to do some photographs based on the blur. You'll see them tucked in up there. And after I did the photographs, which I loved, I said, well, again, you can see my modus operandi. I take a picture, I take an image, and I try and make something from it. So I said to myself, let me try and make this as a sculpture, and this is what I ended up with. Now, I titled the series Hubris because I was an abject failure, and I was arrogant thinking I could do that. It's one thing to make a model of a caboose, but it's another thing to take a blurry image. This one I keep for myself, and here's the image over here, and that's the idea, to put the two together so that you look at this, you look at that. These were meant to be glass, but it was also COVID and I was not working with Lauren. So I substituted ceramic globes instead of the glass. I still like them. I mean, I'm still fond of them. And again, it's that drawing. The thing that I think I was lucky in the University of Chicago, Ruth Duckworth built large pots, but if you notice, all her pots had tiny bases. And she was the one that showed me about press molds. So she'd have a very funky press mold with a shape like this, lay her clay in, and then she could keep building up the clay and make these big arc shapes. And then when the clay hardened, she could take it out, but now she had a narrow base. If you contrast that to Yun Kaneko and Toshiko Takeizu, who build those large dome things, their things go down to the bottom and they're heavy. You know, it's like, oh, come on, you could lighten it up a little bit, lift it up. I mean, you know, I was listening to Van Morrison, Just Like a Ballerina, in Astral Weeks, a beautiful album. No drums, by the way, I realized. There's a beautiful song, Just Like a Ballerina. And what does a ballerina do? Tiptoes, lifts, defies gravity. And that's been a recurring theme in all my work. I don't want it to be heavy or clunky or falling down. Clay is dirt. It's earth. It wants to go back to the ground. And so if I look at anything, I don't care if it's a cup, a bowl, or a plate, does it have lift? You know, and if it has lift, then that person has worked to defy the intrinsic nature of clay. You know, it wants to return to the ground. Okay?
So here's my suggestion. Why don't we field a couple of questions here, and then we'll just walk into the next room, and I'll let people kind of mingle and ask Raymon one-on-one questions and follow up. But if you have questions about things that Raymon has said in here, now is the time.
See? Okay. Well, you're first.
I, as a photorealist artist,
What?
photorealism,
Yeah.
you're explaining your work as photorealist sculptures. I'm very curious.
Well, photorealism, you know, to sell art, you have to have a label or a title. So you have pop art. You have expressionist art. When Julian Schnabel came around, it was neo-expressionist, was the second thing. Photorealism flourished around mid-1975 to early 80s. And it was really started with a painter taking a slide or a photograph and rendering it so that when you saw this big canvas, you thought this is a photograph. Or you thought this is, you know, whatever. You didn't think it was a painting. And these people were, I mean, expert technicians. I mean, your mouth dropped. In the photorealist sculpture, though, there was really one true one. It was Marilyn Levine. And the Everson has a couple pieces. So she, well, trompe-l'oeil or photorealism. So it's the same, interchangeable. But the marketing gig was photorealism because that made it new. Trompe-l'oeil, well, you know, that's old, you know.
And I have to say that the Everson has a terrific Raymon trompe-l'oeil piece, which is the Easy Credit Billboard, which has come out several times since I've been here. So that's something that we'll bring it out at some point during a docent meeting, and you can all connect it.
So you're using trompe-l'oeil and photorealism.
But photorealism was the capitalistic marketing ploy to make something new. Come on, are you an American or not? Okay. No, and you see that everywhere, you know, and that's the sad thing in music. Garth and I collect music, and we're sick addicts of music. And I'll read a review about this type of music, and I go and well, this was done in 1975. What the hell? But they have a great label, and then you think by the label, oh, it's new, it's refreshing. Yeah, maybe around the edges. But in photoreal or trompe-l'oeil, there was an artist, and myself, I forget his name, he did wooden sculptures of power tools. But he never painted them, so they were natural. They looked like a Powermatic table saw, Model 66, which I owned, but it was all natural wood. There was a guy that carved, oh, I know, DeAndreas and Dwayne Hansen. Okay, so there was another guy that carved in marble objects. You know, like a radio, a 1930s Art Deco radio. I mean, incredible technique, you know, precise, perfect. But again, because it was not painted like. But here's the other two sculptors, Dwayne Hansen and John DeAndreas. And John DeAndreas did nudes, okay? And, you know, he cast them and he painted them. I mean, he glued every pubic hair in place. I mean, he was a maniac. But they were so realistic, you know, you're like stunned when you see them. Dwayne Hansen did working people, like a museum guard. He had the uniform, the costume, and all that. And, you know, they're not alive, I think. Or is DeAndreas alive?
I don't know about DeAndreas, but
Dwayne Hansen's dead. Yeah, yeah. But so I was lucky. I didn't know about that term, but my clay masqueraded as wood. And that's what Ivan saw, because, you know, he's a marketeer. Oh, perfect. It's model railroads. People like miniatures. Men love model railroads. And I have something I can sell. And I can call it photorealist. So, you know. But trompe-l'oeil, I wouldn't have sold as much, and I would have blamed you. Okay, you had a question?
Yes, I wonder, you said you changed that circular piece there from glass to
Yeah.
clay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that would be almost heavier.
No, because
You must have made it very thin.
no, what I did, I took a balloon and I covered it with a thin slab. That's how the clay. It's hollow. But the idea was to supplant the glass globe I would have blown with Lauren with ceramic because I could control it. I didn't have to go out of my studio. It made it easier. So they're not specifically that heavy, you know. So, you know, but it technically, you know, again, I like light as much as possible.
So that's stonework?
No, terracotta. All terracotta. Yeah. Okay, and other questions, or are you going to steal my ideas? I just want to make sure before you leave.
Inspired.
Inspired, very good. That's the polite term. Anyone can steal any of my ideas, by the way. I stole from other people, you steal from me, it's no problem. You know, it's simple. I may charge a fee, take a percentage, but that's different. Any other questions? Okay.
You and Lauren, who chooses the colors?
Well, that was part of the communication problem, you know, because I didn't have a sense, you know, I mean, what they have is in the glass studio, half the work was blown in Corning, the other half was blown in Urban Glass on Flatbush in Brooklyn. And so you have these bars of pure color that you crack off a chunk, you mix it with clear glass. So I would, on this work, I said I want more mixture of color. So again, you know, when I showed you the piece here, there's a little red with the blue, a little transparent. Here there's a little orange and mottling. I wanted it to be more like ceramic, but I couldn't convey that in glass terms. So Lauren, and also when you talk to a guy who's doing architectural work, sconces and chandeliers, he's not into fucking up the work. It's like, it's going to be perfect, everything, you know, thickness, translucency, color. So it was a problem.
It's a little too rigid.
Yeah, it was a little too rigid. But I mean, he was game to do it. But the issue you're talking about is how do you communicate? I didn't know enough about glass. And so I do more reading about glass, and I am not kidding about Blown Away, this Netflix show. You know, there's two. There's the pottery throwdown. I mean, I would have been flunked out on the first episode, the challenge. Oh, no, you don't got to get out of here, you know. So, but I learned more techniques in glass, you know, to add to it. So if I did it again, I would want it to be more ceramic-y, you know, for want of a better word. Okay, I know there was someone else that had a question. Yeah.
I just have a question about your collection of music.
Yeah.
You and I think it was it Alan, collected 3,000 vocal recordings of
Amazing Grace.
What
Yeah.
was the impetus behind that?
Well, you know, it's hard to say. Alan was not fond of music at all, and his father was a cantor, which was really strange, not wanting to be involved with music. And my first musical exposure was singing Gregorian chants in Catholic grade school at the masses. Luckily, I was in Chicago, so I got exposed to, you know, blues music, you know, rock and roll, R&B, and all sorts of things, and that opened my eyes. Alan got touched somehow by the song Amazing Grace. I got touched by the fact is if you listen to a white group do Amazing Grace, they go, oh, Amazing Grace, how sweet the love is, blah, blah, blah. In the black gospels, amazing. I mean, it's a mourning song. So I said to Alan, well, look, let's put together a couple CDs, white versions and black versions, to contrast the cultural approach to a common song. So we did that. And then it was like, well, you were doing that, well, let's just keep going. So, and you bring up an interesting point. I'm on eBay, and I forget, it was like the 1990s. There were dozens of records from fundamentalist churches all across America. And Alan was very wealthy, so it was never a problem of budget. So I'd buy everything. To get a black recording from a black church was nigh impossible. And the difference was, black churches didn't have the income, their patron, you know, the congregation was poorer, they didn't have the resources. You had famous artists like James Cleveland, Aretha Franklin doing versions, but the amount of church music from small churches, it really showed the strength of the Christian right in America. I mean, prior to Trump, prior to, you know, Jerry Falwell and all those people, it was there. And it was interesting. I mean, a lot of the versions are tacky, you know, and they're not great music versions. But again, it's part of our history, it's part of our culture. So we decided, Alan gave away his collection of photography to the Museum of Fine Art in Houston, to the Yale Museum, gave away his ceramics to the Mint, and we decided to give away the Amazing Grace collection. We do have it on the web, and we did want to do a website, like historical, and we met a record producer, he's a big shot in a record company, and we introducing him the idea. He's going, oh, I love the idea. This is so brilliant. This is blah, blah, blah. He's waxing on so enthusiastically. And then he stops and he puts on his cold face. And this is how I'm going to sue the shit out of you for putting the music on without having our copyright permission and us getting money and a cut. It's like, okay, wow. So what we did was we gave it to the Library of Congress. We gave them a computer. If they own the physical possession, i.e. the record or the CD, they can play it on a computer for the listening room. So you can go there and listen to any version because they have the physical copy. Now we surreptitiously have an Amazing Grace player. You can't pick the song, you can't decide, it just plays it continually. And we don't publicize it. I mean, now Alan's dead, so maybe they can't do anything, but God knows. The idea of, samples stopped too. Now you have to buy a sample. And the sample would won $100,000. Come on, I'm a poor black kid from the Bronx. How am I going to get $100,000 for one sample? How about if it's a hit record, I give you a percentage? Make a deal. So anyway, that's where we started. You did your homework. Anything else? Come on, I got a full cup of coffee going. It still hasn't run down. Okay, so let's go in the other room. We'll look and walk around.